This is not a studio, but I want studio quality lighting and I want a studio quality background. And to help me out today, I've got the amazing Charlotte. Charlotte's going to be the model for this photo session, and normally I would start with lighting Charlotte, but not today. Today we're going to think about the background first, and then we're going to go on to the foreground because I want a clean white studio finish. And to get there, I've got to get my background absolutely perfect. Now, I could use the walls of the living room that I'm in here, except being a living room, it's got curtains and walls and things going on. So I'm going to cover up the background with this, a pop-up background. Now, I'll leave links in the video description to take you back to Adorama, where you can find all the kit I'm using, including this reversible background. So it has a textured surface and it has a completely blank surface. Now, it's not totally white, but you know what it's not? It's also not a set of curtains or drapes. So that's already going to be a better look than where we started before we put anything as a background. For the backlight, I'm using this, the Flashpoint Explore 100 Pro, and there's a setting around the back that I'm particularly interested in, and it's the one that says zoom. So at the moment, I've got it set to its most zoomed in, which is 85mm, and if I take a picture like this, it's going to give me a more condensed beam of light, which means we get this sort of vignetting around the edge. Now, I can change that from either the remote control or on the Explore 100, and 28mm is the widest I can set it to. And although that's not a huge difference, when you have so little space to play with like we do today, it's going to do this. Yes, there's still vignetting at the edges, but it's just slightly reduced. And if I crop in, then I can reduce it even further. So if I'm not taking a full-length picture, then this might work absolutely fine. But that white background isn't quite white enough yet. So it works like this. The more light I put on the background, the whiter it's going to be, because white isn't actually white. It's just really overexposed any color you like. So in theory, if I put this on full power for that little flash, it's going to throw all of the available light and it's going to make that white background really go white. And you can see that that vignetting has disappeared. It hasn't actually gone. We've just massively overexposed the corners and we've massively overexposed everything else, because light bounces off the background, bounces around our little living room, and eventually finds its way onto the front of Charlotte, lighting her face, which is cool, but not what I'm after, because if you look really close, you can see we've lost all of the detail in her fine hair, and we've lost all of the contrast in this picture. So I'm going to go with a setting sort of in the middle. I'm going to try 1/8 power and see how that goes. So let's take a test photo like this. Now, when I take this test photo, you might think I'm trying to get a nice pure white background, which is what we asked for at the beginning, except I'm not. Have a look at this. This is the blinkies on my camera, and you can see that there is an area where it is pure white, which is blinking red on the preview, and that is just around Charlotte's head. Everything else beyond that isn't quite white. But here's the thing, I know I can fix those areas really quickly in Photoshop. So having a pure white area that just covers your model's head is exactly what I'm trying to go for in this small space. Now, the obvious thing that's missing from this photo is any light on Charlotte's face, other than the light that's just bouncing around the space. So I'm going to add in a second light. Now, we're going to go into detail on how to do this in a minute, but for now, I'm just going to pop it to the side and slightly behind Charlotte, because although we haven't got a perfect silhouette, we've got something that's fairly close to it. And if you're going to have a silhouette, then really what you want to have is a profile picture. So Charlotte, can I ask you to turn towards the light for me? Lovely. And we'll take a few photos like this. Charlotte, are you ready? Here we go. Being in a house rather than the studio, it is the physical size of the space that is the limiting factor, which is why Charlotte is sat down, because I don't have a lot of vertical space. And the further away I could get Charlotte from the background, frankly, the easier this whole white background thing would become. But it is what it is. the background works pretty well, although it might need a bit of adjusting when I add this in, because this is going to become a foreground. It's going to make it feel much more studio-like in here. I've got something, because we're just in a living room, that I found lying around, and I've got a white surface for Charlotte to lean against, but you can probably see the problem with this straight away. And that's because, well, we're not in a studio. I don't have access to all of the bits and pieces I would normally use. But if it's not in the picture, it doesn't really matter. So this is a box that we use to bring things around and carry things into the house. And now I think that's about the right sort of height for Charlotte. Once we've got this set, we now need to think about the key light that's going to light Charlotte's face. Now I could take a meter reading and exposure setting just like this with Charlotte sat like that, but she's going to be leaning in. So Charlotte, if you can lean in for me, and that might just slightly alter the exposure. So it's best to get your model in position and then work out the exposure from there. So Charlotte, I'm going to take a meter reading. I'm going to pop this near your chin. And I'm going to get my light that's going to light Charlotte to be exactly the same as my camera settings, f5.6. Now I'm using a flash meter for this, but you can do it by trial and error and get exactly the same results, just a few more photos required. And the end result should look like this. Now I've turned the background light off for this, so we're only looking at the light from the key light, and that's a really important thing to do. If you're going to do more than one light, start with one light and then add a second light in once you have the first one correct. Now obviously the background there is quite grey because the background light is turned off, but we know that when I turn that background light back on at the same settings, 1/8 power, it's going to give me a much whiter background. But if you look down where the white foreground meets the white background, there's that little vignette creeping back into our picture yet again. So what's going on? Well, it's all about distance, because there is a fixed distance between this light and the background. And when we change to the edges of this background, that distance extends, the inverse square law kicks in, and that's why those areas are more grey. Now I can't increase this distance. We are in a small space. We don't have lots of room to play with. So instead, I'm going to make the light more even by getting the light and putting it further away from the background. The inverse square law says that what should happen is now this light, having more distance to play with, should be a more even coverage on our background. Will it actually work? Nearly. On one side, when we look at it, I can see that I've got my red blinkies covering that area as being pure white, but on the opposite side, it's not quite white. It's better than it was, but it needs one more thing. So the solution is to add a second light to the background. So I have one either side, but where to put it? You'd think just putting it to the side would be okay, but you've got to be a little bit careful with your placement, because if I put it here and I take a picture of Charlotte like that, I get great light on the background, but as you can see, there's a weird highlight on Charlotte's cheek, which is simply because I've got this light too close to the front of Charlotte. A little bit of light is just catching her. So the solution is just to make sure that the lights that are lighting the background only light the backgrounds by having them behind the thing you actually want to light, your model. So this should give us a much more even illumination, a little bit more Photoshop work to do, but we'll get to Photoshop just after we've done a few photos, because, Charlotte, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's take a few photos like this. Here we go. We'll let the cat out first. Charlotte's leaning on a 2-foot square sheet of white acrylic, but that could be white foam core or a white floor tile. In fact, both of those two things might be better because this is a bit bendy. Right from the very start, my goal for this look has been to do as little work in post-processing as possible and as much work in camera as I can. However, I can't avoid the fact that there will be some post-processing. So here I am inside of Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom Classic's developed module, and when I look at the image, it's pretty good. But if I turn on the clipping warning, which is this little triangle in the top right corner of the histogram, you can see those red areas don't match what I remember seeing on the back of the camera. And that's simply because the back of the camera is a JPEG, this is a RAW file, it has way more data, including data in the highlights. So to get the two to match, I'm just going to take the whites and increase the whites until it just goes past the top of Charlotte's hair, like that. Now remember, right at the beginning I said what I wanted was to have detail in their fine hairs, not too much white in the background. So I'm being very, very careful about how much I put in there until I just keep that data in there, because I can fill in the rest myself. Let's do that now using a brush. So mask tool, let's choose a brush, and then I'm going to get a little bit of white, maybe 50%, something like that, and then put a bit of white in there. I'm not sure it's a percentage, 50 is a number, but that sort of halfway house seems to feel about right to bring the slightly not white areas back to pure white. What about the corners? Well, I can get those pure white as well by making a new brush. Click on the little plus button, choose brush, and then I think I'm just going to whack up the exposure, maybe 3 stops. We'll take up the shadows and we'll take the blacks to maximum as well. And I'm just going to paint. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Let's turn the, yeah, look at that, that's fine. Paint over those areas, super bright. They're way away from Charlotte, so I'm not in any trouble damaging her hair at all. And just click on the open button, and that will bring my very final neat picture into Photoshop. Now here, I could work further on this image, or I could extend it. So if I get the crop tool and I make sure my fill is set to the background color, I can extend this whole background with whatever color I like. Well, it's purple at the moment. Let's click on the little black and white arrow to make my background color white. And now, knowing full well that everything around Charlotte is white, when I extend the background with more white, I get this amazing, huge, studio-style, perfectly clean white background, all taken in a living room. The secret to having a successful studio session when you're not in the studio is to not set your goals too big, by which I mean don't try and do a massive set. Keep it small, keep it compact, and remember that anything that exists outside of your frame doesn't really matter. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, why not go down to the comments, give it a thumbs up, and of course, whilst you're down there, you should definitely click on that subscribe button. I'm Gavin Hoey. Thanks for watching.